Well, we are living more and more as the days go by in a throwaway culture. There has been a gradual shift over many years, particularly in Western society, to be from a society that crafted and created and repaired and maintained to one that is far more comfortable buying, breaking and replacing. Move on. And, we can talk about how that's built into the systems these days for things like phones. It's cheaper and easier to buy a new one than it is to replace them and than it is to repair them and all of those things. But as a general shift in Western society, we are more comfortable buying and replacing than we are with repairing and maintaining. Of course, that statement always has its limits. There are still people who craft beautiful things. Even here in Ulverstone, we have people who knit and sew and build and repair and create. We value handmade objects. We value handmade furniture. Something that is made specifically for us has more intrinsic value to us than a bulk generic item. And if it's made by someone we know, then that increases its value to us as people. But broadly speaking, the culture has shifted. Products today are cheaper and easier to replace than they ever were to repair. Interestingly, I think this applies to lost things as well. If I've been away for work and I unpack my suitcase and can't find my toothbrush, I might look again just to make sure I haven't put it somewhere weird in my luggage. But I'm not going to tear the house apart trying to find a toothbrush. I'll just go and get a new one. They're easily accessible. They're not expensive. It's a quick fix. Even a TV remote, you know how easily they can disappear and slip into the gaps in your couch. And you can never seem to find them again, particularly if it's my teenage son who puts it down the side of a couch. There's a story behind that. And if you can't find it, a day or two later, it's very easy just to walk up the street. There's 3 or 4 shops, even here in Ulverstone, where you can buy a remote that will work your TV, and it will also probably work your stereo and your microwave and your oven and anything else that you use a remote control for. Oh, come on, you don't use a remote control for your oven. I need to know you're listening to me this morning. We live in a culture that will quickly move to replace things that are lost rather than valuing them. But not everything fits that category. If one of our cats disappeared, and I have a love-hate relationship with our cats, I can tell you we would not simply shrug our shoulders and go and buy a new cat. That's not the first thing we would do. We would search, we would put out posters, we would ask around the neighbours, and we would put out food to try and entice it back and hope against hope we didn't find it in a gutter somewhere with it. I'm just going to leave that sentence unfinished. If I lost my wedding ring, and most of you would notice that I don't often wear my wedding ring, it's not because I've lost it, I know exactly where it is, it's that my fingers are a bit fat for it at the moment. But if I lost my wedding ring, I wouldn't simply shrug my shoulders and go, oh well, doesn't really matter. I would tear the house apart, I would retrace my steps, I would search and I would search until I found it. Why? Because the value of what's lost to the person who's lost it determines how hard we're willing to go and search for it. Determines what we are willing to do in order to go and find the thing that we have lost. Sometimes, I think if we're honest, we even treat people in this same way. People become easy to overlook, easy to dismiss, and easy to write off. Particularly if they're not like us, or they're a little bit annoying, or we find them frustrating, or we have to keep going around the same mountain in conversations with them without ever seeming to get resolution. Things are replaceable, and sometimes we think people are replaceable too. And that's exactly the sort of thinking that Jesus is confronting in these parables in Luke 15. He tells two stories, one about a lost sheep and one about a lost coin. Interestingly, if you know your Bible, Jesus doesn't stop there. These are only the first two stories of three that sit together in the lost stories narratives. He goes to tell on one more story, a story about a lost son. And sometimes we call him the prodigal. Sometimes we talk about it's the loving father. I don't want to undercut my brother's sermon next week, so I'm not going to go there. In fact, I'm just going to sit where Jesus wants us to sit first, which is in these two parables, which set us up for next week's parable. Because these stories help us to understand something about the heart of God. A shepherd loses one sheep out of 100. Now, pragmatically, it's pretty good odds. I've still got 99, I'm ahead. A woman loses one coin out of 10. I mean, sure, both of these things have value. They're not valueless, but neither seems irreplaceable. A pragmatic person might say, cut your losses, protect what you still have. But that's not what happens, is it? The shepherd goes looking for the sheep until he finds it. In fact, the shepherd doesn't just go looking for the sheep, trailing everything else behind him. He leaves the 99 and goes to find the one. And the woman tips the entire house upside down looking for this coin. I don't know how many of you have tipped your house upside down, metaphorically, trying to find something, but how often do you then lose something else in the process? And you go to find it later and go, I know I saw that when I was... But she lights a lamp and searches carefully until she finds the coin. And when they do find what was lost, they call their friends together to celebrate. Why? Because what they lost mattered to them. And they went and found it. Because these are such short parables, there are layers here that are easy to overlook. And I think it's important that we understand some of the layers to see what's happening in the big picture. Jesus deliberately tells two stories that sit in two very different worlds. Think about them. The first story is about a shepherd. Ladies, this was a man's job. These days you could probably go and get a job as a shepherd, but in Jesus' day, this was the man. The men out in the field looking after the sheep. A shepherd and his lost sheep. This is a story that would have resonated particularly with the men who were sitting there listening to his story. The second story happens inside the home. Again, not to be gender specific or unequal or any of those things, but the home was far more in those days the woman's domain. This is her place. A woman and her coins, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But this is a story that would have resonated particularly with the women who were listening to him. You see, Jesus is doing something very deliberately here. Everyone understands the feeling of losing something precious, and the truth that Jesus wants to reveal about God is not only going to be for one group of people. It's not just for the men, it's not just for the women, it's for all who were listening. That's the way he's grouping that together. Because the message of these stories is simple but profound. Lost things matter to the one who has lost them. And Jesus is using these parables to tell people that lost people matter to God. And we know that from the very beginning of the passage, right there in verse 1 and 2. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." The scandal. They were scandalized that Jesus would associate with the ruffians, with the tax collectors. They're in bed with the Romans, with sinners. Just associating with a sinner who's unclean could make you unclean, and then you've got this whole issue that you have to deal with. You're far better off excluding yourself from them. They're not worth your time, is what the Pharisees are saying. But Jesus looks at those sinners and those tax collectors and sees something different. He sees what God sees, something valuable that's lost. The lost sheep represent people who have wandered away from God. The lost coin represents people who have fallen away from God, who are in the house, they're contained within, and yet lost. Let that sit with you for a moment. And the uncomfortable truth of the Bible, for the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who were there, for the people who were listening alongside them, and for us, is that this is all of us. All of us. Pharisees, teachers of the law, clean, unclean, tax collectors, Romans, Ulverstonians, Penguinites. I don't know what else we have, Devonportonians. It applies to all of us. We were made to know God. We were made to love him. We were made to live under his good rule. That's why he created us, to know and love and live under his good rule. But all of us wander, all of us rebel, all of us choose self and self-interest over God, and all of that is sin. And sin separates us from God. So the first thing that Jesus wants us to see is that this applies to all of us. We are all the lost sheep. We are all the lost coin. Tax collector, sinner, Pharisee, teacher of the law. All of us are in this parable. Secondly, in both of these stories, something important happens. I want you to notice it's not simply a well-trained sheep who wanders around for a while and the shepherd leaves a bowl of fresh grass clippings out and it eventually finds its way home, dragging its tail behind him, or however the nursery rhyme goes. And the coin doesn't magically roll back out of hiding, coughing at the dust bunnies and criticising the woman for her poor housekeeping. The shepherd has to go looking, and the woman has to search carefully to find the thing that was lost. So the point of the parables is not simply that the lost exist, and it's not simply that the lost are found. The point is the person who values what was lost goes and finds it. The person who values what's missing goes searching until they find it. And if the thing that is lost is people, then it's not hard to extrapolate that Jesus is saying God goes searching for his lost ones. God cares about the lost. God cares about those who aren't in relationship with him. He doesn't just care about those who have figured it out and turned to him in repentance and faith. He cares about those who still don't know him. Or in those days, the sinners and the tax collectors. God goes searching for that which is lost. Now that's not a new idea, and we know that because we heard it already this morning. Isaiah 40, centuries earlier, the prophet Isaiah had written, he, God, tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Jesus himself would later declare he is the good shepherd. A good shepherd leads his sheep. A good shepherd protects his sheep. And if a sheep wanders away, a good shepherd goes looking. That's exactly what Jesus is doing. As he walks the road to Jerusalem, he is already doing the work that the cross will complete. He is seeking that which is lost. And when the shepherd finds the sheep, Jesus adds a beautiful detail. The sheep does not walk home. The shepherd doesn't tie a little noose around its neck and lead it painfully, berating it the whole way home. No, the shepherd joyfully puts it on its shoulders and carries it home. The shepherd, listen to this, bears the full burden of the rescue mission in both going out and bringing the sheep back. The shepherd bears the full weight of the rescue on his own shoulders. That image ought to point us forward to the cross. Jesus does not simply find sinners and say, hey, sinner, fix yourself. Hey, sinner, sort yourself out. Hey, sinner, you're lost. Find your way home. He carries the full weight of our rescue. Just sit with that for a moment. You were lost, and your shepherd came and found you and bore the weight of your rescue. I think it's important to recognise that the second story would have felt deeply personal to many of Jesus' listeners, because scholars suggest that because Jesus mentions the specific coins that are in use here, the silver coins or the drachma, and he mentions that there's 10 of them, that it probably had a deeper meaning, that the women listening would have gone, I know what that's about. Scholars suggest that they may have been part of a woman's wedding headdress, a band of coins worn across her forehead that made up part of her dowry, or that they were the life savings that were put aside as the bride price for that woman. And so if that's the case, losing one coin isn't just about, oh, I've got to go and make more money. There's something deeply significant that's been lost, something very important about that woman's identity and her marriage that's being spoken about in that culture. Mind you, that coin was worth a whole day's wage. Like it's not an insignificant amount to lose. It's not like you dropped a 5-cent piece down the side of the couch. I don't care about that. So you dropped a whole day's wage. But it would mean losing a very precious part of their identity. So this is why it makes sense she would light a lamp and sweep the whole house, and why she would search carefully until she finds it, and that she would throw a party and her friends wouldn't just go, oh, you silly old woman, it was under the couch, you should have swept there first. They come and join in and go, yes, this is so good that you found this thing, it's important. Lost things matter to the one who has lost them. The shepherd goes and finds the sheep. The woman goes and finds the coin. Which brings us to the final truth, because if we think about it, it means there's a problem that has to be solved. If this is about sinners, this is about those who have walked away from God, if this is about those who are not in right relationship with Him, who are lost, what happens to justice? Because our sin is very real. Our rebellion is very real. Our separation from God is very real, and God does not, and in His holiness cannot, simply pretend that sin doesn't matter. It's not mind games. If sinners are going to actually be restored to God, someone must deal with that sin. And that's exactly what Jesus does. The Good Shepherd does not simply search for the sheep, he lays down his life for the sheep. Jesus goes to Jerusalem. Jesus goes to the cross. He finishes walking this path that he has set his gaze resolutely upon. There he takes upon himself the judgment that our sin deserves. The lost are truly rescued at the cross, and the cross is the cost of our rescue. The shepherd finds the sheep. The shepherd carries the sheep. It is the shepherd that pays the price to bring the sheep home. And the cross is that price for you and for me. That is why these parables are such good news. Lost people matter to God. You matter to God. Your friends matter to God. Your family matter to God. Our community matter to God. Not because you are impressive, not because you deserve it, but because God has set his love on you. God has so set his love on you that he sent his son into this world. That he sent his son to the cross. That Jesus willingly went to the cross on your behalf. So much so that through Jesus' death and resurrection, we can be forgiven and restored. That the sin problem is dealt with. That the lost are borne on the shoulders of Christ and carried home. And when that happens, heaven celebrates. Jesus says there is rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents. In fact, there is more rejoicing in heaven. What does the text say? Over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who don't need it. If you're a gambler, the odds are weird, aren't they? Right? But that's the love that God has so set on you. Heaven throws a party when the lost come home. And the truth at the centre of these parables is nothing more and nothing less than this. We were lost, and God came searching. And he bore us home. Lost people matter to God, and it is the cross of Jesus Christ that proves it.